Okay, all right. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be focusing on Akhenaten, but because of that, we do have to talk about Nefertiti, and then we'll move on to Tutankhamen. And those ideas all do go together, believe it or not. Now, when it comes to questions concerning the division of religion and state, ancient Egypt was very unified by the Nile River, flowing through this otherwise very arid country. And as much as this river was the sole regulator of natural life in Egypt, fertilizing and renewing the land each year by its flooding and leaving behind that very rich mud deposits, which is ideal for planting. Pharaoh, he was the supreme regulator of both Egypt's religious and political life, commanding all the resources and wealth of his country with godlike powers. In fact, even the most mundane of matters. The Egyptians believed that Pharaoh was indeed the god Horus, the son of Osiris in human form, which made him a living deity on earth, and who was eventually fated to join Osiris after his death. Right. So there's a special formula, a pharaonic formula that held everything together. Right. So like more than just a mediator between the gods and the Egyptian people, Pharaoh was the key link between all nature and society, with his, of course, supreme authority invested closely to his sacred personage. To question Pharaoh was to question the, themselves. This was simply not done. Yeah, how far could this pharaonic experiment go? How far could you push it? How far could you hold on to power and change the society that has been part of Egypt for thousands of years already, right? And so unity was always the goal, right? Unity was always the goal. So it arrives with Akhenaten. Akhenaten, he reigned from 1367 to 1350 BCE. He took a risk that essentially questioned some of Egypt's most central cultural beliefs. Akhenaten not only wanted to unite the secular and religious duties under his authority, but proceeded further by attempting to unify Egypt under one God as well. You see how that works? Now, Akhenaten, he did not start out as a pharaoh denying the Egyptian gods. In fact, when he ascended the throne, he was like most of the other rulers of Egypt, giving the deities of the land of the Nile their proper due. Of course, when he ascended the throne, he had a different name, that of Amenhotep IV. What does the name Amenhotep mean? It means Amon is satisfied, as an Amon-Ra. Now, he was the second son of Amenhotep III, and but because of a situation, it turned out that the second son would succeed the father. Akhenaten, I'm going to call him Akhenaten, even though at this time his name is Amenhotep IV, just to keep things really straight, because otherwise we're going to get lost. So just know his name is not Akhenaten yet. We're going to call him Akhenaten, but his name is again Amenhotep IV. His father, he suffered from a very lingering illness. And so that means that Amenhotep, or I should say Akhenaten, gained power in littleness, taking over for his father, a little at a time, gradually. Unlike his immediate predecessors, for instance, Thutmose III, who ruled from 1504 to 1450 BCE, who extended Egypt's influence as far as the banks of the Euphrates through his constant campaigning. Akhenaten, he was concerned with life at home, with questions of religion rather than conquest. In Thebes, because Thebes was the capital of Egypt at that time, the new pharaoh ordered his artists to decorate the southern entrance of the great temple of Amun-Ra with images portraying him worshiping the god Ra Horixti. Horixti. Who is Ra Horixti? It translates as Ra, who is Osiris of the horizons. So Ra, who is Horus of the horizons. This Horixti was the sunrise-oriented aspect of the god Horus, and because of this, was connected to Ra, the deity of the sun. Yet furthermore, because Horus was believed to dwell in Pharaoh, as we talked about, so he is the incarnation of Horus on earth, right? Horus, as Horikshi, represented the sunrise aspect. This god then became connected to the concept of the resurrecting Pharaoh, the Pharaoh that resurrects. Akhenaten then was bringing himself as Horus more and more in connection to the sun. You see this. So he's Horus, but he's connected specifically to Horus. That is the sunrise-oriented aspect of Horus. So it's the sunrise Ra. Because of this, you're going to see this with Akhenaten. So much of what he focuses on is the rising sun upon the horizon. Okay? The rising sun. Well, this is fascinating, right? As opposed to the setting sun. And you're going to see why that's important a little bit later on. So there you have it, right? So it's the kind of the beginning. I could see some aspects here. Now, let's talk about Amun, okay? Because we have to talk about Amun because his name, Amun, Hotep the fourth, the Akhenaten's name, remember that? We have to understand Amun and who Amun, this god, is, and then we're going to go and see how he is replaced. Okay, so because Amun's really important, but let's go there. So Egyptologists have show that the Egyptians really long revered the god Amun. In fact, he's mentioned in the pyramid texts in the Old Kingdom, right? Especially the text connected to Unas, the 5th dynasty. Amun is paired with his female consort, known as Ament, and they are numbered as the primeval gods of creation. Amun may be translated in many ways. It can be translated as what is hidden, what cannot be seen, what is not seen. And so this means that Amun was understood as this hidden power behind the primeval abyss, this hidden essential energeia, this energy that empowered the manifestation of the creation of all things. It's this energy flow that makes all life happen. In many cases, what they will say is that Amun is the god that creates the stage of the universe. And then it is Ra who brings upon the people upon this stage. So that's kind of how it's understood, at least early on. So he is like the unseen wind He is beyond the physical. He is essentially that which is spirit. And so he's mysterious, right? He's hidden, they say, to his children or hidden to gods and men. So we can't fully understand the mysteries of nature of who Amon is. He is, in essence, the concept of the unknown God, right? That which is one does not see. So it made it difficult to make his form known. Sometimes they showed him as a man sitting on a throne, holding a scepter, and usually an ankh. Sometimes he's shown with the head of a frog, while his consort, Amet, had the head of a uraeus. However, when Amon had a head of a uraeus, then Amet, his consort, his wife and sister, in some cases, had the head of a cat. So, uh, by the time you get to worship of him in Thebes, what we'll have is that this invisible creator god Amun will connect with the god Ra, this great sun god that moves the barge of the sky, that's pulling the sun across the heavens, right? Ra, and then of course at sundown goes below into the realm of the darker forces and fights the demons and then of course towards the end fights the great dragon, the great serpent of old, to rise again with the sunrise as a champion of light, right? So light defeats darkness, right? So Ra is kind of this heroic figure doing the sacred journey each and every night. The 12 hours of the night, he is doing all this. So these aspects, Amon Ra, then joined together. Okay. And so that moves us to Othmos the First. Othmos the First, he is the founder of the New Kingdom. He reigned from 1539 to 1514. What happened is that he what is you had the Hyksos. He defeated the Hyksos during the Second Intermediate Period, and so established the New Kingdom. And what will happen is that you had so much power before during the Second Intermediate Period that was focused on Heliopolis. And so now it is moved back to Thebes as a central capital as it was during the Middle Kingdom. Othmos gave special credit. This is important now. A special credit to Amon, the god Amon, for guiding him to defeat Semitic Hyksos. So he was his special spirit guide, so to speak, defeating this power that had taken over for over a century, Egypt. And so he got the credit. And so that means he made special dedications to this deity and elevating Thebes to become a very prestigious place, including elevating the status of the cult of Amun Ra in general, which gave a lot of power to the priests. So the priest of Amun Ra gained a lot of power in Egypt as a result of Othmos the First and these dedications. And so even though the Egyptians were not monotheistic, it seemed to be that Amun Ra became a central deity, and the priests gained a lot. In fact, because of this, under Othmos the First and its successors, they raised the tax amount, revenue. Yes, you have taxation, religious taxation, and so people paid more taxes because they had to support these priests. I'm already starting to make a lot of sense, aren't I? So Amun is very powerful. Okay. So, but But what happens is that let's move on to this is the world that Akhenaten grew up. He grew up with his father, reverencing the Amun Ra and the powerful priesthood, and and he started to think a little differently. Um, he started to think about uh, the concept of not Amun, but the focus on Ra, the focus on the idea of the sun and the idea of the light and the idea of the rising sun in the morning. These ideas. And so he started to think of the disk of the sun as being somewhat holy or a holy representation, is the best way to put it. And what do they call this disk of the sun? They called it Aten, Aten. This is essentially the disk of the sun. It was mentioned before amongst the Egyptians, especially the story of Sinuhe, Sinuhe. Sinuhe, the story is set around the 12th dynasty, which is 1991 to 1802 BCE. And here, the deceased king is described as rising as God to the heavens and uniting with the sun disk, the divine body merging with its maker. This is in the story. Okay, I'll say it again. The deceased king is described as rising as a god to the heavens and uniting with the sun disk, the divine body merging with its maker. The story, Sinew, we're not going to talk too much about it. He was an official who accompanied the Prince Senwosret the First to Libya. He overhears a conversation that's connected to the death of King Amonhet the First. We don't know what that conversation is, but he overheard it. And as a result of overhearing this conversation, apparently maybe it compromised him, his security, and he worried about that. He fled to a place called Rechnu. Rechnu is Canaan, ancient Canaan. So he left Egypt behind. He becomes the son-in-law of a certain chief by the name of Amonishi, and he grows up to become a chief in his own right. And then, of course, as an old man, in the aftermath of defeating a powerful opponent in single combat, he prays to be returned to the homeland. He says, "May God pity me. May he hearken to the prayers of one far away. May the king have mercy on me. May I be conducted to the city of eternity." And so then he returns at the invitation from King Sentwerset of Egypt, as I mentioned before, and who accepts him in highly uh, respectable terms. And he lives out the rest of his life in royal favor and is buried in a beautiful tomb. And basically, it's kind of like the reversed, story of Joshua, where Joshua goes down to Egypt. In this case, it's the story of Sinehu going to Canaan. So it's kind of a reversal. But anyway, long and the short of it is this is where Aten is mentioned, right? And we're going to find other references to Aten coming about more and more under his father, which is fascinating. Amonhotep the Third mentions the silver Aten and depicted as a falcon-headed man, which is much like Ra. So there is a little bit of interest in this with his father. So I know we're taking our time, but I want to make sure you really understand where these ideas are coming from, as opposed to just saying this happened, that happened. I want you to know why Akhenaten makes the choices that he does. So we're going to understand that really well in a few moments. Okay, so basically there. So despite the strong polytheistic heritage of his people, both Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti eventually became focus more and more upon venerating the disk of the sun as representative of this higher power, this mysterious higher power of light and beauty and strength. So it is still mysterious, like Amun, but without the priesthood, right? So, you know, and so they, the two of them become the earliest recorded monotheists in history. Um, Now, well, for them, of course, Aten will be understood as the universal and the only deity. He will eventually change his name from Amun Hotep to Akhenaten. Akhenaten, you see the Aten in that name? Akhenaten can mean either he who is acceptable to Aton, or it can mean the effective spirit of Aton. And of course, again, Aton was simply the disk of the sun that represents a higher idea, a very much higher idea. So there you have it. Now, moving on, I want to go here. Let's go to some more evidence, archaeological evidence. We had to look for more evidence of this change during the Temple of Aten. The Temple of Aten that was built by him on the eastern side of Karnak, it was called the Gimpaten. The Gimpaten basically means the Aten is found in the estate of the Aten. So that's what Gimpaten means. There's a great temple. So he builds this temple dedicated to Aten at Karnak. This temple has no roof. It's completely open to the sky, and there's an offering table located there. Akhenaten believed that temples dedicated to any element, any aspect of the sun, should not be dark enclosures, but they should be great structures that are bathed in the divine light. At this point, Akhenaten called Aten by a very long name. A very long name. Later, it'll be shortened up. But at first, this is the name of Aten. You can see why it's way too long to use. Here it is. So the name he uses is, and it'll be a long Egyptian word, it means the living one, Ra Horus of the horizons, who rejoices in the horizon in his identity of light, which is in the sun disk. I'll say it again slowly, because there's some meaning here. The living one. Okay, so this is a living deity. Ra Horus of the horizon. You can see this earlier belief in this connection with Horus right there, right? Who rejoices in the horizon. So there's a sense of celebration, of joy, of happiness. One thing you got to understand about Akhenaten's monotheism, it was supposed to be a happy celebration, right? In his identity of light, which is in the sun disk. So it's the identity of light, which is in the sun disk. So you are not worshiping the sun disk at all. So it's anti-iconic. You don't worship the sun disk. You worship what it represents, right? Which is this divine, universal light. Does that make so? I know people say, "Yeah, they're worshiping the sun disk." They don't worship the sun disk. They worship that which resides behind it. Now that is interesting, because I always think about the Mezabop sites. I always think about the sacred standing stones that are dedicated throughout the ancient Middle East, and many of them are dedicated to the all-high sky god El or Elal or Allah, right? And they represent this all-high God by a stone. You don't worship the stone. It's the idea that it represents a higher idea. Well, that's the same thing going on here, except it's a disc. So there it is. Okay. So what will happen from here? Okay. There was another structure called the Hut Benden. The Hut of Benden is the mansion of Benden. It was dedicated to Queen Nefertiti. It was also dedicated to Aten. Again, this is built early on in his rule. This is built at Karnak. Now, what is interesting is that there's been a change in the way he builds his temples. And this becomes pretty obvious in this structure. You see, all of Akhenaten's newly constructed temples at Karnak were oriented towards the east. They're oriented towards the east and the rising sun. Why is that important? Because the rest of the temples are directed towards the west and the setting sun. So now you have a change of orientation of the temples under Akhenaten. So now it's the rising sun. Again, that makes sense with his Horus connection of the horizons, right? Of the rising sun, right? Okay, so worship of other gods was still permitted during the early part of his reign. In fact, it was permitted up until his 4th year. He allowed other people to worship other gods. And so the priests of Amun continued to practice their daily rites, as we find from the inscriptions. And he still called himself Amenhotep IV. But things will start to change when it comes to the 4th year. The most revealing text of the nature of Akhenaten's new god and his motivation for introducing him to the Egyptians, we find this in the 10th pylon located at Karnak, the 10th pylon. Now, this 10th pylon, unfortunately, it's reused. It's reused by Hornheb a generation after Akhenaten's death. So it's recycled masonry. And unfortunately, because of that, when they repurposed this block, they cut half the inscriptions, not half the inscriptions up and down, half the inscription side by up. Not, as opposed to cutting it this way, side to side, another half the inscription as in cut literally in half up and down, which means that we have the first part of it, but not the latter half. And so we just have to kind of figure out the missing pieces. But it does give an early account of Akhenaten's reign, right? We see a little bit there. The text begins with Akhenaten basically claiming that all the other gods have failed, and he uses the word ceased. All the other gods ceased. Maybe to be effective. Now, in fact, they talked about another deity in exchange. This god who himself gave birth to himself, and no one knows the mystery of inscription cut off. He goes where he pleases, and they know not his, possibly not his going. So you have clues on this other god. So the other gods, they cease. They cease to exist. Now, how did he cease to exist? It's a concept that this Aten, this energy, this light that is represented by the disk of the sun, did it destroy these other gods, or is it saying that they ceased? They never existed in the first place. We don't know. I mean, there's deeper questions here, right? The inscription on the 10th pylon not only shows Akhenaten not to worshiping one god, but of course questioning existence of the other gods. He says, how matchless is his God? He describes the sun disk, or I should say the light and the energy behind the sun disk, as his father. As his father. And he describes himself as the fair child of the sun disk. The fair child of the sun disk. So he makes Aten his father, and he is the son of the father. So he is, in a sense, the son of God. This is fascinating. We find this in the inscriptions. He is the son of this all-powerful, all-knowing God of light and energy. Oh, we could go places with this one, couldn't we? Okay. But then again, unfortunately, still this inscription is in fragments. We take a look at the verb, for example, bit, which means ceased. And again, we're not sure what it means precisely. That's a whole other topic altogether. But it seems pretty obvious that Akhenaten exalted this, the energy and light behind the sun disk as supreme. And as you heard in the inscription, not to go, but he gave, right. This is a God who himself gave birth to himself, gave birth to himself. So that means that he is self-begotten, right? And he's all powerful. And of course, as a result of this, you could see that this will lead to some intolerance, especially again in the 4th year of his reign, as I mentioned before, where he forbade the worship of any other god save for Aton. In fact, his boyhood tutor by the name of Pharaoh actually threatened anyone who refused to follow this new direction in religion. There's an inscription on Pharaoh's tomb that's located in Thebes that goes as follows. I'm reading it. Now the sun knows which is the servant that is diligent with respects to offerings, the servant who is not diligent with respect to the offerings of the sun disk gives himself over into thy king's power. For the grain imposts of every other god are measured merely in small amounts, but for the sun disk, they are measured in superabundance. Well written. It's a threat. So you better follow after this belief. So you have forced conversion over to this belief system. And then by the 5th year of his reign, Akhenaten changed his name to Akhenaten. Again, he was Amenhotep IV, but in the 5th year, he is now officially Akhenaten. And also in that year, he founded his new city of Akhenaten, which would be his new capital that is in El Amarna today. So by the 5th year, he changes his name. He also changes the capital of Egypt from Thebes to El Amarna, which of course is Akhenaten, right? Now, of course, we find that aspects of the theology of Aten are recorded on a rock tomb, the walls of Akhenaten. And so I'm going to go through a little bit about the theology here. If you guys want the details, you're going to get the details. Hope you don't mind. You'll know more about Akhenaten than most people. It's like, okay. According to the belief system of Aten, night is the time to have fear. So one should do one's work during the time when the sun is present, who is Aten. So by the light of day is when you're supposed to do your work. Aten is described as caring for every single life, every single creature, everything that's whether it be creature or plant, it's sacred to him. In fact, it says that he is the one who created the Nile River. He is the one who also gives rain. I mean, he is over everything, all countries and all people. And the rays of the sun disk holds out life to the royal family. Now, this is important. I'll say it again. The sun disk, or the energy and light behind the sun disk, holds out life, this all empowering life to the royal family, but everyone else receives life from the royal family in turn, which is Akhenaten and Nefertiti, in exchange for their loyalty to Aten. So that means, so he kind of builds on this earlier pharaonic formula, but as opposed to being Horus, the incarnation of Horus, and whose mommy and daddy is Isis and Osiris, and he dies and becomes one of the Osiris, right? It's instead of that, you're now having a Akhenaten who is the son of God and his consort Nefertiti, and they're the ones that they're the ones who receive the energy and light, and they're the ones through their intermediary powers. They're the ones who then distribute these blessings of light and energy and everything else to those who are faithful to them. So you're faithful to Akhenaten, you're faithful to Aten, and therefore, and so on. Is that making sense? So he is the key. So you have to venerate Akhenaten. So that makes him perhaps even more powerful in many ways, right? And of course, when a person dies, according to this inscription, they live in a place known as the City of Light. That's interesting. It's a city of light. And the conditions there of life in general is the same in the afterlife. Akhenaten is the judge, whether one should be granted this afterlife or not. He's the one who holds the scales of justice. And so because of that, you do have an afterlife. You believe in Akhenaten, and you accept him as the intercessor between Aten, right, and yourself, right? If you accept what Akhenaten gives, then you will have salvation. Where is that? On this wall inscription that I just described. Oh, it's in stone. Yeah, it's in stone. Sorry. You're okay. So now what will happen is that, of course, all other religions, belief systems are now illegal. So what does he do? What happens? Remember those priests of Amun? Yeah, I suppose Aten, the priest of Amun, right? Amun Ra. They're not only demoted, they are forced to work in the quarries. They're stripped of their priesthood, as all those others who either worship Aten or you're out of the priesthood, and they're stuck working the mines, basically. And there is also, unfortunately, he does execute others who follow this. So the cult of Amun is completely wiped away, and those people who are part of it were either working the mines, hard labor, or they were killed. That's the end, or convinced to change accordingly. Now let's go a little bit further in this. I want to say that remember the high taxation? Yeah, no more taxes. What? Remember the high taxation to support the priests of Amun? There's no taxes. What about the taxes to support Aten? No taxes. You can see that people are going, hey, we don't have to pay any religious tax. So many scholars have said that the cult of Amun Ra had become corrupt, had become bloated, and they started to view themselves as pharaoh makers. They had gained too much power, and also became so rich from all these revenues. And the Akhenaten decided to get rid of all this, and believing that the people will support such an idea. Like, hey, you're free of all these taxes. At least to this particular, they still have to pay taxes, but not to the cult of Amun Ra. So there you have it, right? So, since all the other gods were deemed as, well, frauds, unseated, what happens, of course, is he banned all images of the gods except for the rayed solar disk of Aten. So, but it's interesting because in this rayed solar disk, each one, quite a few of them, not everyone, but most of them are marked by an additional note in hieroglyphics that asserts that the disk was merely an image, did not represent the actual deity. Ah, interesting. And as I mentioned before, the cult of Amun Ra was destroyed. It was over, right? Lost their power. And so there you have it. And many people say that he also did not like the fact that the cult of Amun Ra was very secretive. He did not understand how a deity that is related to the sun in the Amun Ra sense was located in darkened halls. How can a god of light be worshipped in under the cloak of darkness? And so there's a lot of distrust there. You can see that through the inscriptions. Um, now, we do have a few other little bits and pieces, and that is that we know that now temples are to be created without any roof, without any ceilings. Which all temples dedicated to this one god, Aten, are to be open to the rays of the sun, right? Well, this caused some problems. Why? Because you know what? Egypt is hot. It's a hot country. And so, worshiping out in a temple in the sun caused some problems. So let's take a look at one of the problems. In a letter from that has survived from an Assyrian king, he complains that one of his emissaries that he sent to Egypt nearly died of sunstroke when they were attending some royal ceremony in Pharaoh's capital. And I'm going to actually read the inscription. He says, "Why are my messengers kept in the open sun? They will die in the open sun. If it does the king good to stand in the open sun, then let the king stand there and die in the open sun." Yeah, I want to read that one more time. So, why are the messengers kept in the open sun? They will die in the open sun. If it does the king good to stand in the open sun, then let the king stand there and die in the open sun. There's some funny humor there, maybe there too, right? So it was torturous. Some people think that Akhenaten died of skin cancer. There's some theories on that, but he's always out in the sun. So now, as I said, he styled himself as the Son of God in various proclamations. And but he wants to make changes in everybody's life. He wants to change religion in general. He and so not only were these temples open to the sun, but he changed the manner of sacrifices. Back in, sure, they did offer incense offerings back in those days before Akhenaten. I mean, as always, and fruit offerings. But uh, they got rid of the animal sacrifices. So the cult of Aten had no animal sacrifices. Aten did not want the flesh of animals. And Nefertiti also stressed this, that we should offer the all high sun, the disk of the sun, or I should say the energy behind it, the light energy behind it, offered instead to this deity fruit and flowers. So you can see how a drastic change this was. Egyptians, they're worshiping in these dark temples, and people are, they're doing the low chanting, right? And and uh, and then of course you have the animal sacrifices and the blood going down the altar. Now all of a sudden everything is all out in the open. People are offering fruit and flowers, and they have a happy choir singing, female singers. What a change is that? Night and day. Let's show the power of Pharaoh, does it not? Right? Okay, so Akhenaten, he moved aside, as I said, from Thebes to um, uh, Thebes to Elamara, which of course is actually in the middle of nowhere, but became the center of Aten worship. Basically, theologically, this is a clean slate. This new hub was located on the eastern shore of the Nile. This place had never been settled before at all, which kind of lent itself to a sense of austerity. It's perfect, right? There's there's no previous legacy. We're starting from scratch, and of course, Akhenaten, the name of this city, which is like name very close to it, basically is the horizon of the sun disk. And I got to tell you that if you visit this place today, you can see the appeal that it had because it is a beautiful place for watching the sunrise. It really is. It's spectacular sunrises, and I think that's what attracted him. You're going to have it's lodged in a recess in the highlands, flanking the Nile. You have, of course, certain times of the year the sun appeared to rise from a yoke in the mountains, which was used in some of the iconography. So you got this yoke shape and the sun rising from it, and they use this in the iconography of a kind of Aten. So it is a perfect place as far as beauty, looking at the sun. No previous legacy there. He, of course, there in his Queen Nefertiti, they made lavish offerings to the solar god Aten when he dedicated the place. And then the Pharaoh addressed his assembled courtiers, and he said as follows. He says, I shall make a Akhenaten for the Aten, my father, in this place. I will make for myself the apartments of Pharaoh. I will make the apartments of the great king's wife, Akhenaten. His pronouncement, of course, uh, was pretty assertive of this new course of new direction, a radical change, right? And so the building process began at a very fast speed. And because of that, they had to use really small stones. These stones are called talatot. The reason why is smaller stones are easier to move, easier to assemble. Larger ones take a lot more time. You need to make this place as fast as possible. It's estimated that 45,000 talatots have been found up to this date. So quite a few have come to light. And these are spread all throughout the world. But just as much as they are fast to put up, it's small stones. It's easy to take them all apart again, and that happened later on. Unlike, like for example, the Great Pyramid, which are made out of larger stones, and because of the larger stones, the heavy weight of each one, they're not as easily moved, and so seem less disposable. But this is like an instant city. We're going to make this fast, almost prefab. All right. The city was about 4.6 miles with a great temple of Aten in the middle, open to the sky. They had 1,700 offering tables. That's a lot of offering tables and benches for the proper offerings of fruit and flour and incense, right? And then, of course, Nefertiti is the one who helped initiate this practice, especially the flower and fruit offerings. She's very much part of this belief system. Incense was burnt in these temples several times a day. Hymns were sung, accompanied by, get this, harp music. Harp music. Even though they had harp music before, right? You're familiar with Egyptian music. You have, the rattles and the drums and the moans, and but they're all about light singing and harps. So again, musically, there's differences going on, and again, once again, no animal sacrifice. Right? Well, we know a lot. Oh, by the way, also there was a place, a palace that had what's called the Window of Appearances, where Akhenaten showed himself with his family. Now, the Amarna letters, the Amarna tablets, we do have written records, a lot of it, an archive that has survived at El Amarna. Yes, an archive survived. And of course, this is, we have the diplomatic correspondence between the Egyptian administration and its representatives all over the place. And these have been preserved. So we're talking quite a few of these tablets are still extant. Okay, so for example, we have 382. We have, for example, letters to Babylonia, letters to Assyria, letters to the Mitanni, Arzawa, which is southwestern Anatolia, uh, Aliisha, which is Cyprus and the nearby coast, Hatti, Syria, Lebanon, Canaan, letters from Byblos as well. So there you have it. So I mean, we have an entire archive. We'll talk about the archive a little bit. So this archive covers about 30 years. It continued even after his reign. So we got a lot of records that survived in the baked clay, and written in Akkadian cuneiform. Yeah, written in Akkadian cuneiform. But archaeologists have also determined that life at this particular city, Amarna, was not pleasant. In fact, in the opposite, other places in Egypt, we have discovered that the skeletons here have poor nutritional diet. They mostly ate this beer and bread. So can you imagine such a hot city with all that beer and all that bread? Oh, wow. Okay. So there you have it. We know that they ate a lot of sand as they're eating their bread because their teeth were kind of worn down from chewing all the time, the sand that got mixed up in their bread. So there you have. So and the life expectancy was not that long, and so unfortunately, because it turned out that there was a high degree of infant mortality there. But anyway, there you have it. Akhenaten. He composed great hymns to his all high light energy deity. Here's one that was found on a tomb. I'm going to read his song. It says, "How manifold is it what you have made? They are hidden from the face of man. Sole God, like whom there is no other. You did create the world according to your desire. Whilst you were alone, all men, cattle, and wild beasts, whatever is on earth, going upon its feet, and what is on high, flying with its wings." It'd be quite beautiful. So, yes. I kind of thought to make innovations in art in general. You take a look at, for example, the art centered around the sun disk Aton. Sometimes they depict the sun disk in an abstract form. Sometimes it's personified. Sometimes even both at the same time. So at times you just have a picture of a mere circle with rays of light radiating downward. That's at some point. But sometimes it's just fascinating. You're going to have the disk, and coming from the disk, you're going to have little hands extending from the disk. So you have this disk with hands reaching down, reaching down towards worshipers. And sometimes these hands hold on to an ankh, which is, of course, the Egyptian sign of life. There's some ones that sometimes people think are kind of funny. A few times you have these hands kind of shoving an ankh up somebody's nose. So you have this disc, you got these hands, and they're putting an ankh up somebody's nose. What does this mean? Of course, this means that they are blessed with the breath of life. So how you get uh, uh, blessed with life, with the breath of life. Just stick an ankh up your nose, ankh, and you'll be happy. Okay, I'm stopping. Sorry. Okay, so Akhenaten also you're going to have uh, you're not sure. Sometimes Aten can be understood as a he, sometimes as a she. It apparently doesn't have any gender at all, so it transcends male and female gender. So it's not a it's the god or goddess that is beyond all things. Now, what is above must be below. And so let's take a look at Akhenaten himself. We see sculptures of Akhenaten, and he kind of looks strange. He has a very long face. He has a very long neck. He has narrow shoulders, slumped shoulders. Like, come on, sit up straight. He has a round, protruding belly. Sometimes he's kind of sitting like this, slumped shirt and protruding belly. He has very curvaceous thighs, very curvaceous, and very curved and round buttocks. And sometimes he's depicted with what looks like breasts. Take a look. You can just quickly see this. If you do a quick, effort, take a look at Akhenaten, Google search, take a look. You see the sculptures. You say, wow, he's not making this up, right? Especially the cone head. It goes way up, right? In fact, he has unusually shaped eyes. They're almond shaped, very full, oftentimes very feminine lips, a sharp chin to accent the face. We see even the series of various colossi, these gigantic images. Sometimes they lack male genitalia. You go, where is that? And why is he pot-bellied and thick-lipped and big-chinned and pointy head? And what is it? Does he have? He doesn't look like everybody else. Some people thought that maybe he had a kind of eucodiism, right? He's like a eunuch. But then again, some other people said that Akhenaten was actually a woman, as dressed, as a man, But then we see him with his family. He sired a family. We see him in art that he appears to have as many as 6 daughters, right? And get this, we know now that we've done DNA analysis that he did have actual sons and daughters, so he is male, right? So there you have it. But he wanted to stress the idea that he is androgynous. In fact, declared he believed that Aten was androgynous too. He declared Aten as mother and father. And so, in a sense, he himself, who is the son of, or daughter of, right, Aten, he himself also now depicts himself as androgynous. But how much of this image, this iconography of him, connects to what he really looked like? Did he really look like this? Or this is just idealism? Well, we take a look, and we have found his mummy. We found his mommy, and we found his mummy. So his mummy was discovered in 1907. It was not known to be his at first. It was a KV55. So they did 2 years of DNA analysis, CAT scans. Take a look, and according to DNA tests conducted in 2010, it turned out that Akhenaten's biological son was Tutankhamen. Oh, there we go. That's why you had those two mentioned together, Ankehaten Nefertiti and I get it now. Yeah, it's his son. Tutankhamen is Akhenaten's son. We know this for a fact. They are related. That's his dad. It confirms this. So let's take a look at his mummy. We take a look at his mummy, and you know what? Unfortunately, somebody broke the mummy apart, disarticulated bones. But we do have parts that survive. And you know what? He kind of has a long skull. Not that long, but just enough that people go, yeah, his head's kind of long. He does have a prominent chin, so that's true. You take a look at his arms and legs, and they are rather long also. So we do know that he was kind of gangly, and he was a little odd shaped, but the rest of his body is smashed. Unfortunately, the pelvic area of his bones are smashed, so we can't know if he had, if he had more rounded thighs or not, because we just can't prove it. And how much is iconography, right? He took these ideas and he made it into part of his art. Akhenaten also enjoyed showing his family, portraying his family. Now, remember, in the past, they portrayed the pharaohs as very stiff and not very personable. With him, he loved showing his family, and they were kind of casual. He loved showing his family hanging out. He's hanging out with his wife. He's hanging out with his children. And there's so many family displays. There's one where Akhenaten is shown about to kiss one of his daughters, who happens to be cradled in his arms, which is a moment of tenderness. So he's showing that he loves his daughter. He's going to give her a kiss. So it's like, wait, what? What is going on here? And he's next to his wife, Nefertiti. Nefertiti has another daughter on her knee, who is pointing, by the way, to a third daughter who's playing with her mother's headdress, especially playing with the serpent pendant on top of it. And then above this image, above it all, you have the one god Aton, shown with many hands, overlooking and seemingly to be part of the inspiration of this family love. Like, if you follow Aten, you can have our love. Look how close we are as a family and how we all get along. And sometimes he showed them nude as well. And so not a lot of decorum, in that sense. So, you have an Egyptian walking by and it's like, oh, why would we want to see that? You can imagine the culture shock. It's like night and day. Literally, everything is different. Unfortunately, we take a look at the images of the daughters and the sons. We realize that many of them died, and if you keep track of it that way too, it's like, oh, what happened to one of them? So, and that's too bad, right? We also see that Nefertiti is definitely not only his wife, but his co-ruler. Yes, they're shown as ruling together. So, in a sense, Egypt was ruled by two, not this just one. And so she is shown with the same kinds of marks of authority that he has. In fact, in many cases, Nefertiti is shown dressed as a man. He's dressed as a female. She is dressed as a man. One time she's wearing a blue crown, which, by the way, is what the various kings wear when they go off to battle. In fact, she's the only queen known to wear this battle crown. Even Hatshepsut was never shown wearing this crown. So there you have it. And in many cases, also she, along with the family, are also shown with elongated faces and skulls, wide hips, and sagging bellies. Yeah, so even the six daughters are shown that way in certain representations. So obviously, they don't all look like that. Nefertiti didn't look like that, but there you had it. So Nefertiti is also mentioned in positions of power with inscriptions. So they are co-rulers, and their authority attributes are kind of mixed between the two. So there you have it. It's very unusual, very unusual. Now, here we go. Moving right along, Akhenaten had various supporters. We're not sure who exactly all those supporters were. A lot of people will theorize that the taxes were so high for the cult of Amun-Ra that the military didn't like that too much. And so by getting rid of these taxes, more taxes could go to the military or military support. There's lots of thoughts. It could have been some kind of revolution, but he was popular enough with the people. It seems to be, at least at first. And also Nefertiti was very popular. There are more images of Nefertiti, in fact, than Akhenaten. I mean, everywhere. And you see these titles for her, which shows his great love for the first lady and ruler of Egypt, not the first ruler, but the first in the positional sense. Uh, in fact, I mean, her name means the beauty has come. Nefertiti, the name means the beauty has come. Isn't that a beautiful name? So when she arrives in the room, you say, wow, the beauty has come. And, well, yeah, yeah, cool. Right? She's also called other names, great of praises, lady of grace, sweet of love. Yeah, I call her sweet of love, lady of the two lands, main king's wife, his beloved, all one title, lady of all women, and mistress of upper and lower Egypt. Akhenaten was an isolationist and a pacifist. And of course, that was not very acceptable at that time. We find this evidence again in the Amarna letters. So we find this in the primary sources. We reveal that many Egyptian vassals beg for help against overwhelming odds. And you know what he liked to do, as opposed to writing letters to those people out there in the frontiers of his empire, he'd like to write love poetry to Aten instead, because he fancied himself a poet. So the complaint started because he could care less what went on in the frontier. I'm going to give you so bad timing, right? A time to be a pacifist and isolationist. It may have worked in the old kingdom, even the middle kingdom, but the new kingdom. The new kingdom had an outstretched empire that went all the way, in some cases, to the Euphrates River, and they're fighting the Hittites. Why in the world would you be an isolationist at this time? So you can see this is going to be a problem. So, for example, the Egyptian alliance with the Mitanni against the Hittites and other potential enemies in the Levant began to crumble as King Tusharatta accused Akhenaten of sending him gold-plated rather than solid gold statues for his continued support. So King Tusharatta of the kingdom of Mitanni, who fought with the Egyptians as his buffer kingdom against the Hittites, he used to get these gold statues, which were worth something, and instead, what happened is Akhenaten sent him gold-plated statues that covered wood. I'm going to read the letter briefly. It says here, so this is again a King Tusharatta of the Mitanni. He says, I asked your father, which is of course Amenhotep III, for statues of solid cast gold, one of myself, and a second statue, a statue of Tudaheba, my daughter. And your father said, don't talk of giving statues just of solid cast gold. I will give you ones made also of lapis lazuli. I will give you two, along with the statues, much additional gold and other goods beyond measure. Every one of my messengers that were staying in Egypt saw the gold for the statues with their own eyes. Your father himself recast the statues in the presence of my messengers, and he made them entirely of pure gold. He showed much additional gold, which was beyond measure, and which he was sending to me. He said to my messengers, see with your own eyes. Here are the statues. There are much gold and goods beyond measure, which I am sending to my brother. And my messengers did see with their own eyes. But my brother, he's now referring to Akhenaten, has not sent the solid gold statues that your father was going to send. You have sent plated ones of plated ones of wood, nor have you sent me the goods that your father was going to send me, but you have reduced them greatly. Yet there is nothing I know of in which I have failed my brother. Any day that I hear the greetings of my brother, that day I make festive occasion. May my brother send me much gold at the Kimru feast with many goods. May my brother honor me. In my brother's country, gold is plentiful as dust. May my brother cause me no distress, May he send me much gold in order that my brother with the gold and many goods may honor me. So, so Akhenaten is sending him gold-plated wooden statues, but then again, this guy seems to be under the impression that there's so much gold in Egypt, it's like dust. Well, maybe it's a little bit harder to come by. But it's true that Akhenaten just simply does not seem to care. So the alliances basically start to rebel, um, and there was a rebellion uh, of his allies against the Hittites. But when they were captured and others sent word for help from Akhenaten, he did absolutely nothing. He did not help them at all. And so, seeing his lack of support, the Palestine rivals, Abdi Hepta of Jerusalem and Libiah of Shechem began to fight one another, forcing Akhenaten to send some Nubian troops to hold off the conflict. But eventually, it gets worse. What will happen is his vassal, Ribhada, who's of the city of Byblos, was attacked by the kingdom of Amru. And this poor king of Byblos wrote Akhenaten 60 letters. 60 letters. Akhenaten responded, "You are the one who writes to me more than all the other mayors," unquote. And he refused to help his ally of Byblos, which is a very important town to the Egyptians along the coast, a trade town. Oh, so what happens now? Of course, Rib Hada loses support. He's overthrown by his brother, coup. You know, he tries to regain the throne of Tyre, but Akhenaten doesn't respond. And so he asks the enemy king of Amru for help instead, who simply sent him on to Sidon to get killed. And then Akhenaten did send for King Azaru of the kingdom of Amru back to Egypt, held him for a year, sent him back. But eventually, what will happen is this kingdom will decide that it's not worth being an ally of the Egyptians and turns and becomes an ally of the Hittites instead. You're going to have even others. I won't go through all the evidence. There's too much. But you even have, I'll just mention this, you have one letter from Pabi to Akhenaten. It was actually found at Tel El Hasi, and that's in Palestine. And it is also complaining the fact that there seems to be coups everywhere, and Akhenaten is not listening. So this is outside the Amara letters. You have the fact that he is just not doing it because of this non-confrontational stance and a disinterest in foreign affairs. Tributes and taxes from these lands ceased, and so now the sparks of rebellion start throughout the kingdom, the empire, the overseas kingdom that was held by the Egyptians. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit over because we started 15 minutes late. so here we go. So during this period of time, so you have Akhenaten, what's happening here? They're losing their empire. The new kingdom is falling apart because he is all for peace, which is great, but maybe he needs to support his allies, but he doesn't. And then on top of this, there was a plague of influenza that broke out throughout the Middle East and Egypt that even killed the Hittite king, Sepulumia. Many people interpreted this flu, this that spread throughout the lands, as a sign that Akhenaten has angered the traditional gods of Egypt. There we go. And it's a sign, right? It's a sign. So there you have it. And now we're going to go into this question. Okay, and we'll go through this briefly before we go on and finish up Akhenaten, although you have a great idea of who he is, right? That is, accordingly, you have the story that the Middle Kingdom fell, and you have the Second Intermediate Period, and those people connected to the Second Intermediate Period are known as the Hyksos, Hyksos. Hyksos. I've already done a talk on the Hyksos. These are Semitic peoples that come from the Levant. They come from Canaan, especially southern Canaan, and they take over Egypt, and they dominate it for over 100 years. During this second intermediate period, according to many biblical scholars, this is when the Habaru, known as the Hebrews, as we see through various inscriptions, enter into Egypt because they are fellow Semites, right? So you have a Semitic Pharaoh, and of course, he recognizes, the story goes, recognizes Joseph, becomes second unto him, that stuff. Anyway, so this is the Hebrews and the Jews, right? They enter into Egypt at this time. Then I mentioned the Othmos the first. He overthrows the Hyksos, and he defeats the Hyksos in the southern Canaan, and he enslaves many of the Hyksos, but he also enslaves their allies. And who are those allies? The Jews, right? The Habaru, the Hebrews. And so now they're in bondage in Egypt. Well, it turns out that these Jews, the Habaru, are supposedly or really enslaved in Egypt at the exact same time as this Pharaoh, as Akhenaten. Now it's interesting because the Hebrews are viewed as monotheistic, and Akhenaten is monotheistic. Could there have been influence one way or the other? Did the Jewish people influence Akhenaten to believe what he did, or did Akhenaten influence in turn the Jewish people to believe what they believed? And that's the controversy, and I'm not going to answer completely that controversy. I would just say there are some differences, right? I mean, Akhenaten, he came as a power. This is a power play. This is used to consolidate Egypt, taking the Horus formula and making it more direct with him as son of God, and of course the idea of Aton as the God, which is beyond understanding. But at the same time, the concept of Aton as being this all-powerful, all-knowing God that transcends all things, that's in nature, that is light, that is strength, that is beauty, and so forth, does have parallels with the Jewish perspectives. And so it's hard not to recognize that there must be some connection, but we're not sure how. However, having said that, I'm going to give you something to work on, right? And here it is. There are some parts of Jewish beliefs that not only parallel aspects of Akhenaten, but seem to be a little too close. And here it is. Psalm 104. So if you look up Psalm 104, you take a look here, and it goes, of course, bless the Lord, right? You who covers yourself with light as with a garment. And it says, who lays the beams of his chamber in the waters. Also says, he causes the grass to grow for the cattle, and of course the trees where the birds make their nests. As for the stork, the fir trees are her house. The high hills are a refuge for the wild goats. As the sun ariseth, the beasts gather themselves together. There go the ships. There is that Leviathan or whale whom thou hast made to play therein. Now, obviously, I abbreviated a few words, but you get the general gist of what this poem is about and how each idea is introduced. Well, it's fascinating because there's a hymn of Aton that goes as follows. It reads, when the land grows bright and you are risen from the horizon and shining in the sun disk by day, all flocks are at rest on their grasses, trees, and grasses flourishing, birds flown from their nests, their wings in adoration of your life force, all flocks prancing on foot, all that fly and alight living as you rise for them, ships going downstream and upstream too, every road open at your appearance, fish on the river leaping to your face, your rays even inside the sea. And there you have it. Now you're going, yeah, there's connections. Yeah, there's a connection. And there's even the same kind of order. And so a lot of scholars say, well, there seems to be a connection here between the two. I mean, it's a little too much, too similar to say there's no connection. But exactly what that is unknown, right? Okay, is this helping? Right, so there had to be some influence one way or the other. We're just not exactly sure what that means. Okay, so what happens now? Akhenaten dies. Yes, we got there, right? He finally dies. Some people say of skin cancer, right? Naturally, after his death, things will change rapidly. The next pharaoh who succeeded after Akhenaten was a woman. That's right, by the name of Nefertiti, 1334 to 1332 BCE. So here we have another female ruler of Egypt. Her female identity is beyond dispute because we kind of know who she is. Think about it. Nefertiti, right? Sounds familiar. She has a title that's called effective for her husband. Effective for her husband? Well, who would be her husband? And a lot of scholars, Egyptologists, say, well, it can't be Nefertiti because she was already dead by the time Akhenaten died. So maybe it's some other royal wife of Akhenaten, right? They had a form of the same name as Nefertiti, and they go through this. But fortunately, in 2012, a certain Athena van de Petter of the Leuven Archaeological Mission at Amarna realized that they had made a mistake. They realized that it turned out there was an inscription that mentions the great royal wife, his beloved mistress of the two lands, Nefertiti. Sounds familiar? It's mentioned in the last year of his reign. So it turned out that they thought that she died earlier, and then they discovered that she didn't. She was still living at the time of his death. And guess what? She's called Nefertiti, which coincides with this name. So guess what? That means that after Akhenaten dies, his wife becomes Pharaoh of Egypt. How's that? And continues the same kind of tasks. Now, there is a shadowy pharaoh that's mentioned also that reigned from 1335 to 1334 by the name of Smernekhar. And a lot of people, though, say that this is just a different name for her. So there you have it. When she dies, right? When she dies, right? So then the next pharaoh is, that's right, Tutankhamen. Yes, who is the son of Akhenaten. Things making sense? So you got Akhenaten, who basically is reigning side by side with Nefertiti. Then Nefertiti becomes the sole pharaoh after he dies. And then after she passes, then Tutankhamen becomes the next pharaoh, who happens to be the child of Akhenaten. As for his mother, who is Tutankhamun's mother? We don't know her name. We have her skeleton. They have the DNA. It turns out, get this, Tutankhamen, okay, his father was Akhenaten. His mother was the sister of Akhenaten. Yeah, so it's a mother. So basically, you have brother and sister getting themselves married or connected together, and they have a child, and that's Tutankhamen. Got it? Yeah. Okay. So Akhenaten then had previously married one of his own sisters. Right there you go. Also, go on further. Is the mother of Tutankhamen, And the sister of his father Akhenaten was the daughter of the Pharaoh Amenhotep. That, of course, makes Tutankhamun's biological grandfather. Talk about keeping it within the family, right? To make things even more difficult, when Tutankhamun became pharaoh, he married his half sister, and her name is Ankehaten. Ankehaten, who, of course, obviously that means that her name is connected to Aton, right? And she changed her name to Ankehaten. Ankehaten, of course, is connected to now Amon as an Amon Ra. And of course, Tutankhaten, which of course is connected to Aten, he'll change his name to Tutankhamen, which is connected to Amon. So both he and his wife and half sister changed their names from dedications to Aten to dedications to Amon. Oh, looks like the Amon Ra is back, right? Back and back, right? There you have it. Now, let's take a look at Ankhehaten, of course, also known as Ankehaten. Ankehaten was his half-sister. Akhenaten was her father, and Nefertiti was her mother, who was his chief wife, right? So when she became of age, she then married her father, Akhenaten. Yet while Tutankhamun tried to have kids with Ankehaten, that attempt proved to be unsuccessful. They had two stillborn daughters that were found preserved in Tutankhamun's tomb. But we see that between the two, that there was a love relationship. In much the same way as you have this demonstrative love that Akhenaten showed Nefertiti and their children, is the same way that we see depictions of Tutankhamun with his wife, Amun, right? And they're shown loving each other. One scene shows her affectionately giving Tutankhamun flowers. So, right? But the decision changed when it came to religion. During the time of Tutankhamun, the sole worship of Aten was ended. The laws prohibiting the worship of the Egyptian gods were revoked during the third year of Tutankhamun's reign. And so Tutankhamun is the pharaoh who returned Egypt to polytheism, to the traditional deities of Egypt, to Isis and Osiris, right? To Horus, and he is an aspect of Horus. And so we're back, and as a result, the priesthood of Amun Ra is back, and so we're going to see this. Amun, what we'll have is that established, the temple is established back in Karnak again. You're going to see that the capital will then be moved eventually from Elamarna back to Thebes. So this change happens, right? And there's an edict that demands that. So you're going to have the abandonment of this particular city. Next, Tutankhamun restored many of the temples to the Egyptian gods as much as possible and re-emphasized their worship. So Tutankhamun declares, this is Tutankhamun talking, the temples of the gods and goddesses were in ruins. Their shrines were deserted and overgrown. Their sanctuaries were as non-existent as their courts were used as roads. The gods turned their backs upon this land. If anyone made a prayer to a god for advice, he would never respond. Now that Tutankhamun is in power, and he's so young, so basically it's his advisors that are the ones that are running the show. We'll talk about in a few minutes. Because of that, everything is rescinded. Akhenaten's power is, over religion is broken. Now they have a problem. I told you Akhenaten was not very good at taking care of their overseas empire, the area south of the Euphrates, and it's time to win back those areas and to fight back the Hittites who took over much of the territory that was previously owned by the Egyptians. The Hittites have overrun Syria. They have overrun going into the area of Canaan. So Tutankhamen is the pharaoh who restores Egypt's power and prestige, right? And of course, um, as a result, various gifts from all around the world, from the allies, right, are given to him. Many of them will be stored in his tomb. I want to make this very clear. Tutankhamen, even though he's run by his advisors, is an extremely important pharaoh outside of Tutankhamun's tomb. People always talk about King Tut's tomb. He's just like a kid, and it doesn't matter. No, he does matter. He is part of one of the biggest changes in Egypt from monotheism to polytheism. He brought everything back. That makes him very important, despite the fact of his very short reign. You guys got that? So he is an important pharaoh. He had two advisors. One is called Ai, his vizier, who focused on internal issues. AI basically is AI, right? And his other advisor was Horemheb. Horemheb was the one who advised him outside of Egypt when it came to various things going on. So he had his interior advisor, Ai, and you had Horemheb, who did, of course, foreign affairs. And between these two, they really ran the show. Tutankhamun was approximately 5'11" in height, which is pretty tall. 5'11", that's tall for ancient times, right? He had a slightly cleft palate, he suffered from scoliosis. He was a lot of pain. He needed a cane even early on in his life, right? He was very young, right? His DNA samples revealed that he had several strains of malaria. There was also a CT scan that revealed that his left leg was fractured and became infected just prior to his death. It had much of the left side of his body. And some people say that it reveals that he must have fallen, and it looks like something like he fell from a chariot and shattered part of his body, and that's how he died. Other people say, no. It's the fact that they covered his body in black pitch. And they said that what happened as they prepared his body, it caught on fire. And because of that fire, it cracked and shattered that side of his body. So there is, lots of controversy there. So, and it's interesting that they paint him or they tar him black. Black is the color of Osiris. Let's go a little bit further. Also, they put on him a raised phallus of Osiris. So he's got a raised phallus showing the potency of Osiris going into the afterlife. So that's important. Another thing I want to bring up is that we take a look at him and he has no heart. Hey, usually they bury the pharaoh and they bury him with his heart. He put the other parts of his body in canopic jars and he usually keep his heart because that has to go through the weighing of the heart ceremony, right, at the very end, right, before Osiris. In this case, he has no heart at all, which is fascinating. However, there are many stories that show that Osiris is, in many cases, did not have a heart. And so, again, it could be they left the heart out because they're representing him as Osiris, right? So, in fact, there's not even a scarab beetle to replace it. So his body represents the return to the traditional beliefs. And he's not off to a city of light where Aton is in charge. He's off to, yes, the Egyptian traditional afterlife with all-reigning Osiris. Now, of course, the tomb was discovered in November of 1922. Howard Carter found it. This spurred on something that's known as Egyptomania. But I need to tell you that his discovery really was a series of accidents. One of the accidents goes all the way back to an automobile accident. Automobile accident? What does that have to do with King Tut? And There's a certain Lord Carnarvon. Lord Carnarvon, he lived in England. He was obsessed with automobile racing on the English countryside. And one day, old Lord Carnarvon took a bad spill and he hurt himself, injured himself to the point where it broke his health. And he could no longer handle the English winters. So where is he going to go? Well, in order to survive, he's going to go to, well, Egypt, right? Egypt is warm during the winter season, and that way he could not hurt as bad. I got bored. Lord Caravan became very bored in Egypt. And so he wanted excitement. He wanted adventure. I mean, he loved racing cars, but now he's stuck with his crippled body. What is he going to do? And go, hey, I'll do archaeology. So he did amateur archaeology. He didn't find very much. He found he found a mummified cat. so he maybe I'll spend money on a real archaeologist. And so what happened is he found a certain Howard Carter who had lived in Egypt since he was 17 years of age and had employed himself as an artist, great with artifacts and inscriptions. And then by 1899, he was the Inspector General of Monuments in Upper Egypt. He held this position all the way to 1905, and he met Lord Caravan in 1907, and they made this deal. Well, so Carter starts making all these explorations, and he focused upon the Valley of the Kings. Carter began to suspect that he was on his way to finding Tutankhamun's tomb. He found some artifacts related to Tutankhamun in Ramses, the sixth tomb. Then on November 5th, 1922, Carter discovered 12 descending stairs unearthed, an upper section of blocked entryway. He found it. And so found a 26 long foot passageway. And after this tunnel, they found themselves before a sealed door. He said, with trembling hands, I made a tiny breach in the upper left-hand corner. Darkness and blank space, as far as an iron testing rod could reach, showed that whatever lay beyond was empty and not filled with the passage that we had just cleared. And then as his eyes, he says, grew accustomed to the light, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold everywhere. The glint of gold is described as organized chaos. He discovered another entrance and another place that was filled with treasures known as the annex. And then off to the side, he saw these two statues. He broke through, and guess what? There was the tomb of Tutankhamen. He said that it was in the center of the chamber with a large shrine constructed of gilded wood that was carefully inlaid with blue porcelain and measured 16 feet long, 10 feet wide, 9 feet tall. After the dismantled first shrine, they found a second one beneath it, and then they found a third, and then they found the fourth, and finally they came across Tutankhamun's yellow sarcophagus. Finally, they came across it, and they found yet another treasure. This was, of course, the beginning of so much in the way of Egyptomania, right? Well, what's going to happen now is that the treasures traveled everywhere. Of course, you have the fear of King Tut's tomb because Lord Caravan became ill, maybe of a mosquito bite on his cheek, and he died on April 5th of 1923. But Carter, he died way later, March 2nd, 1934. There's lots of stories, but we can revisit that later. Following the death of the 18-year-old Pharaoh Tutankhamen, his vizier, Ai, became Pharaoh, 1323 to 1319. Took the reins of power. As I said before, Tutankhamun's trusted interior advisor was Ai. His military commander was Horemheb. Now, it would seem that Horemheb was the one that was groomed to be the next Pharaoh. In fact, he was declared as deputy of the Lord of the Two Lands, but he wasn't there at the time. He was off fighting battles, trying to restore Egypt to its former glory that it had lost during the time of Akhenaten, who basically ignored the allies and allowed the Hittites to have their way and take over so much of these territories. So Horemheb's out fighting. So because he's away, i.e., is the one that becomes the Pharaoh. But it doesn't last very long. Well, what happens now is Horemheb, as he's off fighting, IE's in charge. IE wants to secure the lineage. So IE decides to marry the widow of Tutankhamen, Ankehaten, even though IE was literally her biological grandfather. What? Oh, yeah. So IE is marrying Tutankhamun's poor wife. You know what? She did not want this to happen. I get that. So she decides to take matters in her own hands. Akhenaten actually wrote a letter to the Hittite king, Superluminous, and he asked him to grant her the marriage of one of his sons. She writes the enemy, you know, the one Horemheb is fighting against? She writes the enemy and says, hey, I don't want to get married to IE, this crazy Pharaoh grandpa. I don't want to do this, please. Can I marry one of you? So this is the idea. Can I have one of your sons? So she's betraying Egypt. She writes, I have the letter, because it survived in the archive of Atusis in Anatolia. It survived, Hittite records, it survives. Here's the letter. She says, my husband has died, and I have no son. They say about you that you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband. I would not wish to take one of my subjects as a husband. I am afraid, she writes. Her reference, of course, of fears is a reference probably to the imminent marriage to IE. Okay, so, well, she doesn't want to marry grandpa. So she's asking for an arranged marriage with the Hittite king. And of course, as I said, they were the bitterest enemies at this time, right? But here we go. King Superluminous thinks about it, and he says an interesting comment. We have his response. He says, nothing like this has happened to me in my entire life. I don't think so. Yeah. Okay, so he sent this to his courtiers. So eventually he decides to grant this request. He promised her his son, Zananza, Zanananza. And so Zananza is on his way to become the wife of Ankehaten, who was the wife of Tutankhamen. But he never made it to Egypt. He was killed as he was traveling through Syria, and so it never happened. And so as a result, she married IE, and then Ankehaten disappears from history. It's so sad. She was not even to be the first wife. She was to be a lower wife. So not even having the dignity. All he wanted to do is continue the succession. Well, because of his advanced years, IE only reigned for 4 years. And then he did designate his son to be the next pharaoh, but he died even before IE. At this point, Horemheb becomes pharaoh. Remember the general out there fighting? 1319 to 1292. So Horemheb is 1319 to 1292. His name meaning Horus is jubilant. And so what happened is that he now becomes pharaoh. He decided that he's going to wipe clean the memory of Akhenaten. He erases the inscriptions of Akhenaten. He erases the inscriptions of IE, who he obviously did not like, but does not erase the inscriptions of Tutankhamen. A lot of people have said that, well, that's because Tutankhamen was the one that really gave him his power in the first place. Others add, they think that he really liked Tutankhamen. And so there you have it. So Horemheb comes to the throne. By this point, he had been fighting and winning the battles of Egypt against the enemies and had restored the Egyptian empire and restored the new kingdom. And this declaration is inscribed on the 10th pylon of Karnak, also describing the official return of worship to the Egyptian gods, although that came about during the reign of Tutankhamen. He is reasserting that. He also divided Egypt in an administrative sense between Upper Egypt under the vizier of Thebes and Lower Egypt under the vizier of Memphis. So there you have it. Horemheb ended corruption, and that was good. He reestablished local religious centers. He also recognized the restoration of the priesthood of Amun, but what he did was interesting. He decided to have selected as members of that priesthood only people that he knew personally. So he's tying himself directly to the power base of the priest of Amun. So therefore he's the one who chose them. And so he recognized the problem that maybe Akhenaten had with the power of the cult of Amun-Ra, those priests having too much influence in Egypt, and he now made it his own appointees in charge. Akhenaten left many monuments behind. Horemheb either destroyed them or he repurposed them and dedicated to other kinds of reasons. Horemheb married Mutanajibit, who many believe was the sister of Nefertiti. And so the two together. And so there you have it. Well, after Horemheb, who, restores Egypt, Horemheb restores Egypt back to what it was at the time that Akhenaten took power. So now we're back to where we were before. Egypt is as strong as it was under Amenhotep III. And of course, always beginning of Amenhotep IV, which is Akhenaten. And then there's a downward slide. Tutankhamen, bring it back up. Under Horemheb, we're all the way back. And who does he designate? Ramses the First. And then there's Seti the First after that. And then, of course, that's right, the great Pharaoh Ramses II, which is one of the most powerful times of ancient Egypt. And of course, obviously the famous Ramses dominates most of the 1200s BCE. So you could see how the story puts it all together. But you could also understand many of the inner workings of why Akhenaten did what he did, but also the mistakes that he made. It's probably not a good idea at this time to be an isolationist and a pacifist in the ancient Middle East during this era, especially if you have a constant war against the Hittites. Egypt was indeed weakened under his reign, but it's fascinating to investigate what his theology was all about, where he went with his ideas, because it seems to be very influential in other perspectives of monotheism, which is a whole nother topic that can be unpacked at another time. And until then, I will say that while under Akhenaten, the sun was rising, when it comes to this talk, the sun is now setting. Have a good night. Thank you. Okay. Did you guys enjoy it? Is that fun?
Very much.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so we understand maybe a little bit more about ancient Egypt. I like looking at the context of all the various pharaohs, so you can see the progression. Otherwise, these pharaohs in isolation doesn't make any sense. But Horemheb really is a hero, in many different levels. By the way, Horemheb also mentions the Habu in his writings, so which is obviously the Hebrews. There's other things there, places to go to on that. But polytheism is restored. So I think we should, one thing, it's my pet peeve. You'll see this in so many books. They'll just talk about King Tut, and they'll not mention what he did. They'll just say, hey, his tomb is great. Look at these treasures. And they'll just talk about Akhenaten. They'll talk about Ramses. But Tutankhamen was the one that was a pharaoh under which the polytheism was reestablished. Yeah, he's even though he lived to be only 18 years of age, he was instrumental and should be remembered. So there you have it. Guess my next talk will be on the non-commodity library. So that should be a lot of fun because I have lots of connections with that through Claremont. So we'll go there. Any questions? A creaky chair? Great. Any questions? Any thoughts? I answered them all. Yeah. Well, I was going to say a few other things. I was going to say that also you could see the difficulty with the priestly bureaucracy of Amun-Ra. I think it becomes pretty evident that there was corruption, and Akhenaten is going, hey, you know what? We're not going to have this, and he wanted power, and a good way to be powerful is to get rid of his potential rivals. And they had gained too much power under Ahmose I. Way too much power. It's pretty obvious to look at the inscription. They're kind of going, oh, because he's supposed to be Pharaoh, God King, and but you should have competition with your priests under the Egyptian formulation of ideas. So didn't want the competition. So basically, just got rid of the competition. And you could see that also. This is a political move, right? Changing the capital, changing the way of life. So, yeah. Any questions? No questions?
Great job. I had a quick question for you.
Okay.
Do you know anything about when he decided to go monotheistic, let's just say, Akhenaten? Remember reading somewhere that he had some sort of a vision that told him to do that, or was it a one circumstance that happened to him that caused him to do that, or was it a multitude of events?
Well, I mean, the problem is that it seems to be successive visions that are recorded in his hymns that he had these ideas. So I mean, it was a political move, but I do have to say that Akhenaten genuinely believed in his faith. He really did believe it. So there were political reasons, but he was sincere to a certain extent. But take a look at it seems to be a gradual change. He had troubles with Amun. He liked the idea that you have this all-powerful, mysterious spirit God that connects all things together. But he seemed to like the fact that remember, Amun's connected to that which is hidden, that which is enclosed. In fact, that which is dark. And it seemed to be that he liked the idea of that which is light. And so he was attracted to the concept of the sun or radiance. I hope I'm making sense. And so early on, he disregards in the inscriptions Amun when it comes to revering him, and sees himself as Horus in connection to the rising sun, which at first is understood as Ra. So there seems to be this attraction to that which is light, and he did not like that which was understood as darkness. There seems to be a preference, and I'm not just saying that like that seems like cliche. Of course, he likes the light as opposed to darkness. No, I mean, if you read his hymns, he really is into the idea of that which is mysterious, that which is unknown, is connected to the light rather than the darkness that was Amun. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
it's the light of day. He literally says that. Oh, does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, he says, he even says, might is to be feared. Work in the day. That's when we're supposed to be doing our stuff, and that's why he flooded. He flooded his temples with light. There's an obsession with the concept of light in a theological sense, in an architectural sense, and yeah. So, and I think that you could say it's an epiphany, right? Because there was mentions of him having these enlightenments, but I think it's a progression. And after a while, he goes, "Well, I don't have to use the word raw for it because the word raw is pregnant with too many different ideas. So let's go with a disc." And it's very modern, also too. Monotheism. Really, he is transcending the idea of any image, right? Because the image is not supposed to be worship. It's just an image of something that is beyond words.
Right.
Which is
like idolatry.
Yeah. So it's very, and that kind of skirts into Jewish monotheism that starts to develop, right? Because the Jewish monotheism is all about not having images, and of course you're going to have that in Islam as well. So,
right.
So there are ramifications when it comes to modern religions. Seems to formulate during the time of Akhenaten. And maybe this is where people ask the question, maybe there was influence going on to the Jewish people at that time, and then they brought to Canaan, and then of course that goes into Abrahamic religions. And other people say, well, no, maybe it went the other way around. Maybe it's the Jewish people that are there that are influencing Akhenaten, and you just take it to the next step, going, hey, this is a great idea. Maybe I could use it, like Constantine the Great with Christianity. Hey, this is pragmatic. Maybe this will transcend for Constantine. This idea will transcend the Roman paganism, even though Constantine was not a Christian per se until his baptism, and he was Pontifex Maximus of not just Christianity but overall, obviously the religion. Still, you still have this idea where he thought it was functionally useful, and maybe Akhenaten thought that monotheism was functionally useful, as opposed to having all these gods. I'm going to have one God under which I stand as the Son of God, and my consort, and that everybody has to move through me and accept me as the intercessor between this God that's behind the disc and of course the people in general. But of course, another interesting part is Son of God concept. So,
right,
something there too. And of course, I'm not sure where to go with that. We just know that he does understand himself as being the son of Aton in the inscriptions. No question about it. It doesn't seem necessarily a complete connection to Christianity, but you still have this idea of representation. As in Christianity, you accept Jesus. If you accept Jesus, you accept the Father. If you reject Jesus in certain forms of Christianity, you reject the Father. Well, in this belief system, if you reject the son of Aton, then you are not of Aton. You are rejected. If you accept Aton, if you accept Akhenaten, then you are of Aton. So you have this acceptance of Akhenaten in order for you to connect with Aton, and in order to gain salvation. So there is a little bit of a connection in that sense to Christianity. You can hear that.
Yes, for sure.
So some people say, well, this is where Egyptian influence goes into Christianity. in the Trinitarian ideas, or not necessarily Trinitarian, but the first, these first two personage aspect. And other people say no. Other people say, well, yeah, this idea of the Egyptian conception, it becomes part of aspects of Egyptian polytheism, and then it goes into it's Egypt. It's connected to Asia Minor, Western Asia Minor, and the city of Ephesus. And then, of course, Heraclitus of Ephesus will take some of these ideas, and he will say, well, yeah, so God is Zeus and not Zeus, and that which is spoken is the logos, which is creative principle. And you have that, and then spreads from there into ideas of Philo of Alexandria, who is in Egypt, and then it goes from there into the Christian Trinitarian ideas. Who knows? But you also have trinities within Egyptian beliefs. So lots of trinities.
I wonder what Akhenaten thought about the moon with his love of the sun.
No, it looks like he thought very little about the moon. He did not review
it. Cast a little bit of light in the darkness.
A little bit of light. Yeah. But, he was definitely very simplistic approach, very clean, basic. Reject the old, get rid of all the gods, change the capital, have a clean slate, and change all the worship. Can you imagine the poor Egyptians? How confused they would be.
Yeah, you got to do that stuff gradually. You can't just do it overnight.
And he did it overnight.
Yeah, that's tough.
They were like darkened halls and moaning, chanting, and the sister and the the drum beats and everything else, and the animal sacrifices, and going from that to places bathed in light and the harp playing and choral music and
I just made that beautiful statue last night. Now I can't pray to it anymore.
Yeah, and of course the statue's gone. Yeah, statues are all gone. Now it's these they're all through places. Kind of an eerie feeling. All the statues being destroyed, and all you see is this disc of a sun, and some cases with the hand stretched out. That's kind of eerie. Yeah, it's really crazy. Yeah. Wow, things have changed. We lost everything, and then this guy is talking about peace. What's that about? And then the other thing is he changed Egyptian beliefs in a sense where, it's all about being out in the open. He was not ashamed. It's like, hey, here I am naked. Okay. Here's me with my family. We're showing affection to one another. Okay. And you can imagine just the cultural shock alone, even in that, where it's like public displays of affection. It's like, yeah, do that. And, and this God inspires this kind of family love. I can see where that could be attractive to a lot of people. They're going, hey, we don't have to pay taxes to this corrupt priesthood anymore. And, the idea of showing public affection and love and kindness and light, and, you can see the attraction. And you probably have a lot of people going, hey, you know what? Who needs an overseas empire? We want Egyptians first. Sorry, you can see that's going on. On that one, you can see what's going on there, right? Egypt will be. It is. In aspects of internal Egypt became the first priority, and they ignored. Tragically, I didn't even read everything that he did to ignore his allies and the overseas empire. Those in Palestine, or I should say in Canaan, and those in Syria. He ignored them. I told you this guy's writing tons of letters. He says, "Oh, you're the guy who keeps writing me." That's his response. I'm dying here. It's like, oh well, he didn't care. And I'm thinking, really, you're going to sit there writing your love poetry to Aton and not pay attention to that your empire's falling apart? And it kind of makes you wonder about his mind. Who is this person? A lot of people, you see this all the time with the guy that has a lot more hair than me, like ancient aliens, going, maybe, Akhenaten is an alien, he looks like one. But that falls apart because we have his DNA. He's not an alien.
Right. He's a human.
Yeah, but he does look weird. He does look odd. Maybe that would affect his self-perception. And maybe he had, did he have some genetic defects? Maybe we didn't seem to detect a lot of them in the DNA. But again, maybe further studies need to be done. But there is something odd about the way he thinks, because it's kind of like he arrives in Egypt and he's like, hey, guess what? It's opposite day. Everything that you believe in, we're going to do the opposite. How's that? And I don't know how he survived. It shows the power of Pharaoh. They let him do it. But just throw out the manual and do everything differently. And the great thing is we have so much in the way of writings, because we have the Amarna texts have survived the cuneiform. They have survived, so we know more about his reign than most of the other pharaohs, because this archive survived. And it survived because after him as pharaoh and Nefertiti as pharaoh, and under Tutankhamen, you have the move back to Thebes. And by the time of Horemheb, they will abandon this capital and it'll be covered with sand. And that will preserve these documents. So, and that's what happens. So because it falls and it's forgotten, it leads to its preservation of this information. So yeah, we know a lot about Akhenaten, his idiosyncrasies and his personality.
We're lucky for that, because didn't they try to basically erase him after? Like they destroyed
they tried to
all
erase
his
him
statues
afterwards. Yeah, they tried to erase him, but hey, the sands protected him.
Yeah.
They can't erase what's buried.
Right.
Forgotten or it's neglected, right? So there it is. So I guess Akhenaten gets the last laugh, right?
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. You brought up an interesting point. So when Akhenaten made all those changes, the opposite day, some of them were embraced. Some of the people were probably on board with it. And then when Tutankhamen comes in and changes everything back, it doesn't seem like there's really any pushback to keeping what Akhenaten had put into place. They were all really on board with going back. Or is that more about, and I think you just mentioned it, is the power of the pharaoh, is they just blindly followed and they couldn't push back?
Well, I have a fun fact that I forgot to mention in my talk. Here's a fun fact.
Okay.
Everybody's doing lip service because they got to go along with this guy. They're hoping that he's gonna go sometime, but they don't have enough power to get rid of him. How do we know that? Is that I told you about Amarna, I told you about its capital. So archaeology doesn't lie, and not apparently, we know that they continue worshiping their gods in domestic space, in their homes. So we found in his capital, what everything is about. There's all the temples are dedicated to Aton, god of light, and everything else, and so forth. And they're at home and they're worshiping their gods privately because they buried them in the floors of their homes. So they're going, okay, we're just kind of grin and bear it.
They just voted out.
This shall pass.
Yeah.
So we know that they still, even though he's going, hey, I'm against this, we know that privately through archaeology that they continued worshiping their gods, but publicly they're going, hey, we don't have to pay taxes on this one, so why not? We'll go with this crazy guy. And then when they go to their homes, they're allowed to be their usual, very superstitious sense, but themselves again. So it looks that way. And that's why they're able to be restored so quickly. Otherwise, if he did a good job, there'd be nobody left to restore anything, right?
Yeah.
He's also still have people who bear names from the era being named during his lifetime after these various deities. Tells you they're still following their practices, huh?
they were hanging on then. They definitely did not embrace that fully. So when Tutankhamen came in, it was more about a breath of fresh air, a relief, rather than a, oh no, let's change it back again. It was finally, okay, cool.
Finally got rid of this guy, you know.
Yep.
Which, of course, is the question of who's supporting him. And they thought at first the military. But here's the problem. He didn't do the military any good because he abandoned the frontiers. So, in fact, he sent in, what was a Nubian troops to help in one case, not even Egyptians. So it's like, wow. so clearly, if they helped him, they probably weren't supportive of very long. And, after he reigned, you do have a very short-lived pharaoh, but obviously you have Nefertiti. But after her, Tutankhamen brings everything back, and we go, shoo. And Tutankhamen's like, you know what? I'm not going to just restore things. I'm going to be crazy for restoring things. I mean, even how he got buried. I mean, it's like, come on. They buried him as Osiris. Who does that? His heart missing and raised phallus and pitched black, just like the black fertile soil of the Nile. I mean, the guy's going all out, or his handlers are going all out to demonstrate that, we're going to swing the pendulum the other opposite way. Yeah, we're not going there. And of course, you're going to have. I don't even talk about AI, but you have Horemheb, who finalizes everything, and most likely, because it's Tutankhamun's two advisors, it was Horemheb behind the changes the whole time. So Horemheb is holding the strings of Tutankhamen, because he's like 15, 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
He just wants to go hunt birds. So it is Horemheb who really is the one who's pulling the strings. That makes any sense for the reform. And then he just happens to be out fighting when Tutankhamen dies, and then IE takes over. It's like, oh great, okay, well that gives me more time to fight the battles to restore Egypt. And when he comes back, he continues. So I think Horemheb is probably the key architect for the revival of Egypt, but still, it's under Tutankhamen where it starts. Any other questions? Isn't Egyptology fun?
I was kind of curious about if he was such an isolationist politically, was he also kind of distant to the people in a sense?
Okay, so good question. He was isolationist when it came to his political policies in connection to foreign policy. No, he's very much into the people. Really wanted them to believe him. So he believed in interacting with them. He believed in great celebrations and festivities and, getting people to be part of the whole story, part of his whole idea, part of his vision. He didn't isolate himself from the people. He made public speeches. He wrote hymns for people to sing. And poetry. So he's very public in that sense. So he wasn't private. In fact, he's the opposite of private. He's public about everything, including his affections. But so he's a very public person, overly public for a lot of people. And I'm sure he convinced lots of people. I'm sure he did. I mean, convinced them, but not enough to change their beliefs, as we find from the underworld. I mean, in his own capital city, they're still worshiping the traditional gods. And maybe they feared him on certain levels because, he killed people and, sent them to the mines if they disagreed. That's a kind of incentive, right?
Right.
And you have this, one of his men tutor guys, I read the little bit there on the fact, the little threat there, if you don't follow up, you're in trouble. So there is that aspect to it. But he wanted his belief system to be a celebration. And if you take a look at the artwork, you see it's all about celebration, about joy and people and interaction. And But as soon as you cross over beyond Egypt, he's like, I had no interest in anything beyond Egypt itself. No interest in Canaan, which Egypt owned at that time. No interest in Syria. I mean, Byblos. I mean, he let Byblos go, which is ridiculous. Byblos is a huge part, even in the story of Osiris. You know the whole story there of Isis and Osiris, where they, Isis goes off to off there to that direction of Lebanon to, it's like, wow, what's going on here? But yeah, so that was very, very important to the Egyptians. That's one of their main bases of operation. And he acted like he could care less or did very little to try. So he believed in peace. He believed that, negotiation. He did talk about diplomacy. We find that in the tablets. He believed in talk and diplomacy. But you know what? That doesn't work in the ancient Middle East. He said, I'm sorry. I know we're thinking like modern people, like, that's wonderful. Yes, it's wonderful now, but then, no. Not with the Hittites. It's like they're going to take advantage of you. And that's what they did. And so he was losing much. If he reigned any longer, the enemy would be at the doorstep of Egypt. They would have. The Hittites would have had all the way to the Sinai Peninsula. Most likely would have taken the Sinai Peninsula and could have swept through Egypt. So that's not the guy you want in leadership.
He did wage war against the Nubians, right? A rebellion or something?
Well, he sent the Nubians, his Nubian troops, help out in a certain fight in Canaan.
According to
yeah, he did. He had Nubian
it
stuff.
was the 12th year. It
Yeah.
ordered a viceroy to quell rebellion of Nubians on the Nile.
Right. I mean, he did that. That's inner. That's the inner area. That's the Nile. That's a direct threat because that goes right against Upper Egypt. So and remember, the Nubians are very much part of the population intermarrying in the Upper Egyptian. So you're going to have, there's a blend there. So that's a different context.
I see.
Yeah,
and
very different.
Supposedly some military action in Syria on the Hittites, but not all historians agree.
Yeah, well, no, what happened is he started strong at first and they got weaker as time went on.
Oh, I see.
Yep. Oh, yeah. No,
and
he let it go.
Wives.
Yep. Yeah, and also on top of that, the conflict, as I mentioned, went all the way down to Jerusalem, which is mentioned, by the way, in the Egyptian records, and Shechem. If you know where those areas are on the map, you realize, oh, that's going down pretty far south.
I see.
Yeah, that's too far down. That's too close for comfort. Yeah. So that means is that he was letting go a very important strategic area, and that's the Megiddo or Jezreel Valley. That's a pivotal area. Usually, Hittites and the Egyptians hold off what's called the Jezreel Valley, and they hold that as at least a line. Well, he allowed that line to crumble. That line, which Thutmose III fought so hard to hold on to, because that was the keystone to holding much of the Middle East, because the Jezreel Valley commanded the area where you have the what they call it, the King's Highway that went along the coast, and there's an opening in the mountains there, the coastal plain. There's mountains along the coastal plain. There's an opening there, which is the Jezreel Valley, which allows access going all the way to Syria. That's why the Golan Heights are so important today when it comes to Israel, because if you lose the Golan Heights, groups will move all the way through the Jezreel Valley and right down to the coast. That's important. So whoever held that position basically held the Middle East. That's where all the great battles happened. Well, he let it go. He let that keystone go. Like, oh, whatever, And they're pushing south of the Jezreel Valley. Well, what else is left after that? You're going to have the Negev. You had the Mount Ramon, kind of flat. Beyond the Mount Ramon, you could just go right across Sinai. That's bad. If you guys know the geography of that area, that's horrendous. So Egypt was in trouble. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right. Yeah, lots of wives, yes. But also his very first absolute wife was Nefertiti. It was definitely the one. And he made that very clear, as I mentioned, too clear in his inscriptions as he goes on. And lots of it, puts her in a high position.
And she was popular with the people too, right?
Yeah, she's very popular. More images of her than him.
Right, like on coins too, right?
Well, not coins, but coinage didn't exist at that time, but images, yeah, various images.
I've seen something that looked round.
Yeah. various kinds of, various pieces.
Yeah, that's
cool. Yeah, so you have that. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, so I covered it, right? Do you guys feel like you've got to know Akhenaten a little bit?
Yeah. Did you see the art exhibit they had a few years ago at LACMA? I think it was, or no, the Museum of Science, I think it was.
Of Akhenaten?
Akhenaten, yeah.
No, I saw the Tutankhamen one. I saw the Cleopatra one. I didn't see that one.
It was very well presented because it was in darkness and just the objects themselves were lit, and it was very it was haunting.
And you know what's really sad? Akhenaten would not want that.
No, that's the sun.
He'd be like, "Where's the light? tear that ceiling down. I want this bathing light."
It was very dramatic though, and the way his visage was so elongated and stuff. It was spooky, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, there's so much going on with iconography. Why would he cast himself, or depict himself in such a strange form? I mean, why? We kind of went into it a little bit, but he did have certain characteristics. But why exaggerate them? Why make themselves look like what they did? And I mean, it really is abstract art.
Mm.
I mean, it is abstract, right? And in the real sense, it's when it comes to symbolism behind it. He's trying to make himself look like the other. He's trying to make himself not look quite like regular people, to show that they were set aside from the rest of humanity, set aside to be the intercessors between Aton and humanity. They are the go-between. And so they have to have this, otherworldly look, and they certainly do. When it gets really strange when you see the whole family looking that way. They're all looking like him. They're protruding bellies and say, why the protruding belly? I mean, it'd be interesting or fascinating to see what the symbolism behind the belly. Wouldn't be like Buddhism, full wisdom, right? I don't know what the slumped shoulders, the protruding belly, what would that represent? I mean, and of course, this is where the ancient aliens people go, well, see, he made himself look like the alien advisors that he was listening to. They look like ETs and big heads and protruding bellies and and there you go. And so that's maybe the reason why he was influenced by these extraterrestrials and came up with ideas that humanity was not ready for. Ideas of peace and light and. But I say, nah. Sorry, I don't think so.
So would it be prosperity? Because I know, like the Renaissance era, if you were fat, you were, that guy's rich, man. I don't know. I don't know if that idea goes that far back, though.
Yeah, but they're pot bellies. They're really strange. It's right. It is, but it could be maybe the idea of abundance. there's another theory. I'll throw it out there because, we're throwing theories out until we're serious. And that is the idea of pregnancy. Because the stomach looks like a pregnancy a little bit, the way the slump. So the idea is fertility. The idea is that Aten is going to give us abundance, and we'll be pregnant with this abundance. And so that's why you're demonstrating the belly represents the abundance that they are full of, as given by Aten, that they're now going to give to others who believe in them. And so that's another thought, because it is like a poop belly. Like it looks less like body fat and more like pregnancy, like beginning pregnancy belly. If you take a look at that image, you see what I'm saying? You're like, oh, what is that? Nice little round belly, right? You see it?
I tried to share an image in the chat earlier, but I don't know if anyone was able.
So you have that. So that's there's a possibility there. But then what's elongated head? I mean, his head is a little elongated, but maybe it has to stand for some other idea.
Yeah.
Or maybe is it possible that he grew up as a how do I say it nice, as an odd-looking fellow, and was unfortunately subject to a lot of bullying or taunting, and that somehow influenced his outlook on life, which then radically changed how he wanted to have others look at life, make it better for people like him in the future. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he had. What's interesting about it is that his, you take a look at his skeleton. Like I said, unfortunately, it's all smashed up. But you take a look at him, and it goes, he was an odd-looking guy. So we know for a fact he didn't look like everybody else. There are certain things that were different about him. And so maybe there's that sense of, well, I'm going to just exaggerate this difference, and I'll make this difference and I'll embrace it.
Yep.
And make it part of my identity, as opposed to discouraging it. I realize I'm different, and I'm going to. So a lot of people will say that. A lot of people will say also that he had a genetic situation, because once again we're back to, unfortunately, we don't have the skeletal remains of his hips, or just don't have it. That part smashed. But I'm wondering, if he did have more of a female shape when it came to his hips. We don't have his face. I wonder maybe if his lips were full. Maybe he looked female. And maybe he got teased for that. Maybe genetically there is something we haven't detected where he is. There's kind of in between. Maybe he's double gendered. Who knows? But he does seem to stress. He has breasts. I mean, what do you do with that? Now you could say, hey. The breast could also represent the same idea that we see with the belly. The breast could also represent the nutrix, the idea of feeding the people. He is the one who gives, refreshing milk. And you have ideas of Isis, right, who's breastfeeding. So maybe the iconography of Akhenaten with breasts connect to this attribute, the belly, fertility, and sustenance. Maybe the breast will represent, rain or some other kind of nutritional notion. So that's a possibility. I don't know. And the problem is we don't know. We don't know. We are guessing. And if we had, because the only way we can understand it kind of not then is through what happened culturally speaking, in the art sense, before his reign and after his reign. That's all we have to interpret. We don't have himself saying what these images mean. So there's a lot of redaction here, right? So, I mean, if monotheism would have lasted longer, maybe the iconography would be better understood. That makes sense, because then we'd have more to work with. But they're kind of like this iconography in isolation, because after he reigns, they end this kind of representation, except for Tutankhamen will continue the, hey, I love the family kind of thing. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. So there you have it. I know people are going to be leaving this talk saying, yeah, he's an alien. Dave says he's an alien. Take me out of context. It's like, oh no, I didn't say that. He's not. DNA. Listen, please.
Yeah.
So,
No,
I think
you brought up a good point about dual gender identity. That's a biological thing. I mean that is possible, and over the course of human history, I mean that the odds would, it could appear that he could have been somebody that had the attributes of the male and the female body, and like a modern day caricature, they just kind of enhance those when they try to paint his pictures or make his statues, so to speak. So
yeah,
that's an interesting theory. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was able to father children. We do have his DNA, so I'm not sure, what we can demonstrate through that. But maybe we should just grow our own Akhenaten and figure it out. Petri dish, we're gonna put together Akhenaten, these poor kids, like the big head. And it's like, thanks a lot.
Instead of Jurassic Park, with Egypt Park.
Huh?
Instead of Jurassic Park, you'll have Egypt Park.
Egypt Park. It's like,
just let them live somewhere where it's sunny, though.
Yeah, where it's sunny, right?
Not in like Seattle or something.
Let's see, in Seattle. No, we camped there. Prison hell. Well, yeah, he kind of wonders. He was obsessed with light. Maybe he had a skin condition too. Who knows? I mean, but then again, we can detect so much from Tutankhamen. So that'd be a good question to ask a scientist in that sense, and who works with the DNA, so that look a little further into Akhenaten's. But it may still, when he still may have those characteristics anyway. Just look that way just because. And so he was, a very feminine looking man with long arms, long legs, long narrow head, full lips, and maybe there was some kind of genetic aspect where he had breasts. Maybe there was. Why he's depicted without genitalia in some cases is very interesting, and why he chooses to show that on some of the big monolithic nude images of him is beyond me. It's like, whoa, okay. So what are you telling me with this? Of course, it didn't break off. The sculpture. It's like it just collapsed. Fell off. It's like, well, maybe stylistically they're going, we just can't do this in stone, so we'll just modify it. Maybe that's the reason why. Easier there. So,
I think it's genetics. That's my guess.
Genetics. Yeah.
If his son was making a baby with his own sister, then I'm sure that type of behavior was happening in Akhenaten's, family tree.
Yeah. And Tutankhamen, had two stillborns.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Them. They had a. So, and of course, hey, Tutankhamen and his wife had a lot in common. Nothing. It's awful. As dad. Not something you want to have in common. I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, drawing the Tutankhamen family tree now is just like a nightmare. So it's interesting. So also Tutankhamun's mom, what's sad about that is her head was intentionally crushed. It seemed to be maybe killed in life. Yeah, interesting thing. So I don't know. Maybe she was murdered. Another. I'm just adding more to the mystery, but yeah.
I feel like every pharaoh or every like ancient leader, there's a theory that they were murdered.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Every single one of them could have been.
Well, it's interesting that Akhenaten had so many daughters too. That's another thought. I just throw that one out. He had a lot of daughters.
How many did he have?
At least 6.
Oh wow.
At least 6 in depictions.
Huh.
The girls in the household there. Although we get different numbers, so inscriptions. Some died and more were born. I mean, Akhenaten was kind of prolific.
Not as prolific as Ramses.
nobody's as prolific as Ramses, right? Except for Solomon. 700 wives, 300 concubines. You know, maybe there's no competition there. So.
Oh, I've heard about Genghis Khan too. He was prolific.
Oh, yeah, Genghis Khan. So many of us are related to him, right?
Like 1/3 of all Chinese people are related to him or something. Something crazy. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Certain people have a way of getting around. So, yeah, if Akhenaten had some genetic disposition, it certainly didn't help didn't hinder his functionality in that area. How's that? So he's still able to be himself there and spread his seed everywhere. Anyway, okay, moving along. Any other questions? No? This is a seedy conversation. All right. Well, I hope you last request. We're on our way. All right.
Is that it?
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being part of this talk. Hope you enjoyed it. We're talking about the Nag Hammadi Library next time, and I will bring up all my Claremont experiences. And the cool part about this is I met and spent time with a large amount of these people that I'm talking about. So, so a lot of these discoveries, and so you'll say, and I met this person. I have some of their stuff right over here. Maybe I'll show that stuff to you guys. Cool. So yeah, they were, and one was of course part of my PhD work as well. So that'll be next time. So Nag Hammadi Gnostic Library. We will go there. I'll tell some very interesting stories, inside scoops. That would be good to have recorded just in general for posterity. Until then, have a great night and see you next time.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you.
Sun also rises.
Thank you, Margie.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Margie.
Guys in 2 weeks.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, looking forward to it.
Thank you. Night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.